Dinner tonight, and tonight we have a very special treat. We have with us, as you know, Jane Bryant Quinn, who is a director of Bloomberg and is one of the nation's leading commentators on managing money. Not just that, but I think she's well respected and beloved by all of us who've been reading her over the many years. Always look to see what has she said, because she says it so very well, and has been trusted by us for many, many years. She has a new book out called Making the Most of Your Money Now, which was published just last month, December 2009. So hasten to the bookstore. This is the third edition of that book. She has many honors. Consumer Union named this longtime bestseller the best personal finance book on the market. She also has a new website at www.janebryantquinn.com, and I understand she also has a Twitter account for those who like to do that. We know her through her newspaper columns, through her reporting on the investment series Beyond Wall Street. She had her own show, Take Charge, for PBS. She also was involved in developing Quicken, which many of us probably use. She's won many awards, including the prestigious Gerald Loeb Lifetime Achievement Award for Business Journalism. She's got an Emmy. She's got a Janus. She's a three-time winner of the National Press Club's Consumer Journalism Award, and that's just the beginning of the list of honors. And we are very, very pleased to have her here with us tonight. Please welcome Jane Bryant Quinn.
Thank you, Janice. I'm very happy to be here, and yes, I am tweeting now, and I will tweet this dinner. I don't know what I'm going to say yet, but I know I'm learning how to say it in 140 characters. It is really, truly an honor to be here addressing the National Academy, because you do such remarkable work in the area that is so important to promoting human happiness, and that is personal financial security. Your expertise is special. Over the years, I have interviewed many of you. Hayworth Robertson here, Ken Affeld when he was at Social Security, and I'm sure there are more people here who I have interviewed. And standing up here, I feel a little bit like the grade school descendant of William Howard Taft, who told her teacher, my great-grandfather was the President of the United States, and my grandfather was a senator, and my father is an ambassador, and I am a brownie. I really feel a little bit like a brownie addressing people who have taught me so much over the years. You better than most know how dependent a country is on a citizenry that is not afraid for its financial future. When fear and insecurity spread, civil discourse goes right down the drain. I think we're seeing that effect today with social unrest arising from a body of angry people who feel boxed in and are lashing out. Retirees and pre-retirees who lost serious money in the meltdown and hadn't saved enough are cooked. They know they're cooked, and they're mad about it. Another jobless recovery is underway right now. So your role as catalyst for preserving and perhaps enlarging the safety net, at least keeping the safety net, is going to be absolutely critical in the years ahead, not just for our personal financial security, but to support the decency of American institutions. Angry people don't mind who they hurt, and I salute every one of you for the care you take. The subject tonight, as you saw in your programs, is what shoulda, coulda, might have been learned from the economic meltdown. When I was revising, this is the third edition of my financial guide, and when I was revising it, I thought of changing the title to Making the Most of What's Left of Your Money. Instead, it's called Making the Most of Your Money Now, suggesting a changed view of the economy and changed view of attitudes to safety and risk. Unfortunately, the meltdown does not seem to have been a teaching moment for Congress or for the banks, who are as arrogant as ever. They are both mouthing still the same self-interested free market fundamentalism that got us into this mess. So don't regulate, don't stymie innovation. Well, in my opinion, we have had far too much innovation. It brought us financial products that were so unsafe that they have driven part of the citizenry to ruin. The lesson that should be learned is that capitalism will drive itself off a cliff, an army of lemmings with bonuses, unless the regulators put up iron fences. But I don't get the sense that a lot of fence building is going to occur right now. The public will rage that the Congress, mindful of ideology and campaign contributions, might give the bankers no more than a tap on the wrist. As Lily Tomlin says, no matter how cynical you become, it is hard to keep up. The prospect of bankers unleashed again makes it all the more important for this to become a teaching moment for you and for me, because we're going to have to protect ourselves against them. The first lesson is, of course, that you don't know the future. Now, that is obvious when I put it into a sentence, but as we generally live our lives as if we do know the future. Basically, we see more of the same, or we see a return to what we had before the market fell. But when I think of these things, I remember the ad I saw in the Financial Times. It said, "The Clairvoyant Society of Greater London will not meet next Tuesday because of unforeseen circumstances." A wrenching change takes us all off guard and unprepared. Now, the stock market, of course, is the poster child for things unforeseen. None of us knows where stocks will be next month or next year. I have a view. I think that the bull market still has a way to run. Typically, when a market comes up from a serious recession, as we've, of course, just had, there's a great big rise off the bottom, which we had last year, up 70%, and then there's kind of settling out and maybe drops a little, and then there is another slower rise, and so if we follow what we have before, that is what would happen. It would rise at a slower pace than last year, but by the end of the year, it would rise. Companies are still cutting costs, mainly by laying off workers, and they are not investing very much. Instead, they are piling up cash. Corporations are more cash-rich coming out of this Great Recession than they have been coming out of any recession as far back as they've been keeping numbers. They're just piling up the cash. They're not even paying it out in dividends. So this means big earnings from some companies, which is one of the reasons I think stocks could end the year up. But I always consider that my view may be wrong. We have no experience with a credit contraction of this sort, and we still have no idea what all of its implications are going to be. So I diversified by keeping more safety investments than I used to in my pocket, and that is the second lesson. I may miss some gains on the upside by holding bonds and bond funds, but if something happens, they are my safety net. They rise in value when the economy falls, and they're a potential source of cash. If you're living off your savings and your stocks are down and you don't want to sell your stocks, you have your bonds, and that's one of the reasons for having them. Another lesson from the bad economy is the high risk of holding debt. You know you shouldn't be holding credit card debt. Your mother told you that all along. Especially with banks raising interest rates faster than earnings are going up, faster than you can open the envelopes from the banks telling you what the new interest rate is. If your earnings are flat, the burden compounds. And I'm not going to beat that horse any longer. You know who you are. Now, I'll take a moment about mortgage debt. Mortgage debt has always been considered good debt because it is supposedly an investment and pays for a comfortable place to live. Now, during the bubble, when home prices rose, we all felt free to borrow against our home equity for any need. Home equity was kind of like one of those magical pitchers in Greek mythology that's full of milk and they pour it out, but they can pour it out forever because it always comes back. Was what we thought of as our home equity. Always more to come. Now, of course, home equity is on the rocks. You might be underwater, not because of your original loan, but because of all the loans you piled on top of it. And the market is not going to restore your home equity anytime soon. That's true even in Washington, which was not as hard hit as other parts of the country. Still, on average, you were down 20% here. There have been only 2 booms in housing prices since World War II. The first boom was right after the war. The military came home. We invented 30-year mortgages, and they all bought houses, and it was a great big housing boom. And then the second one we have just emerged from, 1997 to 2007. In between, what happens to house prices, all those years in between, is that they more or less follow inflation. A little bit up, a little bit under, or maybe right on, depending on land use issues and whatnot and where you live, but basically flat. And during those years, people they don't think of their homes as an investment. They think of homes as a nice place to live. To build equity, they paid down the mortgage. What a concept. We used to call it forced savings. How many years has it been since you've heard that phrase? In the second edition of my book, in fact, where I wrapped up the editorial copy in 1996, it was published in 97, we were, of course, toward the end of one of these very, very, very long periods. And at that time, the mindset was, why should I even buy a house? Because it doesn't do anything. I'm putting money into it. I should probably rent or buy something very small and put my money into the stock market instead. And the subhead of the chapter that I wrote about mortgages and home buying said, yes, it still pays to own a house, because I was speaking to people who thought it didn't pay to own a house. And you've probably completely forgotten that that was the attitude 12 years ago, but that's the attitude. Since then, of course, the whole idea is that houses are great investments, but I think we are going to return to that attitude. Houses will not be great investments anymore. You'll acquire some equity when prices rise, but your biggest gains in equity will come from paying off your loan. It's going to be years before your house is worth what it was in 2007. And certainly, if that happens, home equity loans will be dead because you won't want to borrow, because you'll want to own your house by the time you retire. In fact, people in middle age should be drawing up a plan to prepay their house as fast as they can, so you can get rid of it before you retire. That's an old-fashioned rule, also one that we forgot about for the past 10 years. You thought you could always sell at a profit and downsize and move and no problem, and so people have been carrying a lot of debt into retirement, including mortgage debt, and they're not being able to pay it down, and we are seeing rapidly increasing bankruptcies among people in their 70s and 80s. One of the reasons is the amount of debt that is being carried into retirement, much higher than it used to be. A lesson from this downturn never learned, despite a lifetime of evidence, is that individuals should not buy individual stocks. I'm sure that all of you own some individual stocks, and I'm going to try to talk you out of it. I want to try to talk you into switching to well-diversified mutual funds. You all know the studies showing that stocks are safe over the long run. If you hold for 15 years, you will almost never lose money based on your starting point. But these studies have been run on the market as a whole, using Standard & Poor's 500 as a proxy for the market. And the mistake so many investors make is to think that that also refers to individual stocks. It does not. The entire market may be pretty safe over 15 years with reinvested dividends, which helps, but no single stock in the market is safe, not one of them. The collapse of famous banks wrecked a lot of retirement portfolios a couple of years ago. Microsoft was a great company in January 2000, but it was a terrible stock. It is hard to diversify out of a stock that you've had a long time, and in retrospect, you may be wrong. Stock may go up. But looking at it that way, that would be comparing a strategy with an outcome. Outcomes are hindsight. Strategies are what you do when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and you do not know which stocks will succeed and which stocks will fail in the future. One of the stocks you are holding may be AIG, and you don't know it yet. In my experience, people who pick individual stocks remember their winners, every single one of them. They forget their losers. They never average the two of them together. Consequently, you have absolutely no idea how well you or your broker or your financial advisor has been as a stock picker compared with the market as a whole. And my guess is that you have not done as well as the market as a whole, which means that you have left money on the table all these years. Now here I'm going to stop for a story about a rich man on his deathbed who wants to take it all with him. So he texts God. He says, God, can I bring my wealth? And God texts back. He says, you can bring one carry-on. So he looks at everything he has. He looks at his real estate. He looks at his stocks. He looks at his bonds and his treasuries. He decides on gold. Fills his carry-on with gold. He appears at the pearly gates, and St. Peter says, what's that? And he says, it's my wealth. God said I could bring it. And St. Peter said, well, let's see it. And he zips open the bag, and all the gold bars roll out, and St. Peter looks at him and says, what? You brought pavement? You never know what is going to be valuable in the years ahead, or when you're going to be valuable when you need the money. You have to spread your money around in the most likely places and hang on. And again, you cannot diversify enough with a portfolio of individual stocks. Now, for those of you in TSP, you've got an easy choice. The government gives you some wonderful target date mutual funds, which are a mix of stocks and bonds appropriate to your age, and you sort of pick one based on the age time you expect to be 65, and they do all of the asset allocation for you, and they rebalance as well. And they got a lot of bad press when the market went down because for some reason, I think it was financial writers, had some idea that they were never supposed to lose money even though they owned stocks. So there was a lot of misunderstanding about that, but I think that they are sensational investments. I back them strongly, and you're very lucky to have them in the thrift plan. For those of you who are not part of the thrift plan, of course, you can buy these kinds of funds at Vanguard and T. Rowe Price and Fidelity. They all have them. For the best long-term return on your investments, you should do any of this with index funds, funds that follow the market as a whole. The verdict is in. It's in. Over time, index funds do better than similar funds run by managers who pick their own stocks. Worse, the managed funds charge higher fees than the index funds do, so you are actually paying your manager to miss. Why would you do that? The same is true of managers who buy stocks and wrap accounts for you at the brokerage houses. There is no managed mutual fund, not one, invested in leading U.S. stocks that has ever beaten the market over the average time long-term holders saving for retirement. Not one single stock. And that is also going to be true of the privately managed accounts. There are always a lot of managed funds that beat the market over 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or fewer over 10 years, but they're there. The thing is, they're always different funds every time. There is no one fund that is beating the market over that whole period. So they get their 3 to 5 years of fame, and everybody buys them, and then they fall behind the market. All of Wall Street is built on the myth that you can find somebody, a good stock picker, who can beat the market for you even after fees. Stock picking, that has never been true, never been true. Stock picking is a loser's game. Index funds are a winner's game. And rising numbers of institutions are now indexing their money, especially after the crash. They took a look at their managers and said, you were supposed to keep me out of this. What am I paying you for? which is a good question, and they are indexing their money. Should you buy and hold? This also has gotten a bad reputation since the market collapsed, earlier market collapse since 2000. So you say, I don't want to buy and hold, but what's the alternative? You can keep your money in bank CDs, where taxes and inflation erode your purchasing power every year. You can try to time the market. You can sell when you think stocks are going up, and buy when you think stocks are going up, and you can sell when you think stocks are going to go down. There is, of course, absolutely no evidence that we can do that. If all of you out here in the panic last March put all of your money into stocks, I would be astonishingly surprised that that was what you needed to do to be a good timer. There is actually a name for people who do manage to jump in and out of stocks at just the right time. They are called liars. So, if buy and hold is a problem, and CDs are a problem, and timing is a problem, then what? And the answer is old-fashioned asset allocation, the kind of thing that's done in the target date funds and the kind of thing you can do yourself if you don't have target date funds. Divide your assets between stocks and bonds in a manner suitable to your age and rebalance regularly to stay at that same percentage and stay on track. The specific allocation basically depends on your age. There can be other issues, but age is the leading one. One rule of thumb is to deduct your age from 110, and the number you get represents the amount of your retirement financial assets that you should put into equities. For example, if you're 50, subtracting that from 110 gives you 60, and so that means it is prudent to keep 60% of your assets in index funds and the other 40% in bonds. The rule of 110 actually was not just pulled off the ceiling. There is a lot of very good academic research behind it, and it's a good guide to diversification at any age. And if you are sure of a solid pension because you're a government employee and it's going to be good and you're going to get your annual inflation adjustments, it is safe to own more stocks than the rule of 110 would suggest. However, when you retire, you still want to go back to a substantial bond portfolio, because if the stocks go down and anytime you are living off your retirement money, you want to have a bond portfolio so that if stocks go down, you don't have to sell the stocks. You can sell the bonds, take money from the bond pool until the stocks go up again. You should stick to these percentages. If you've decided on 60% in stocks and the market rises so much, God willing, that now you are 65% in stocks, you should sell that extra 5 points and you should put that into your bonds. And if the stocks go down, they're now less than 60%, you take money out of bonds and you top up your stocks to the proper percentage. This is called rebalancing. And tons of research shows that rebalancing reduces your risk, which is the principal reason for doing it, and it can improve your returns. And you can do that with TSP, of course, if you aren't using the target date funds. But the target date funds are rebalancing for you. Had you been rebalancing in the summer of 2008, you would have sold some of your stocks and moved some of the money into bonds. In November and March, you would have moved money into stocks. It would have all automatically, by the way, just following the formula. It would have terrified you because we were in the middle of a panic, but looking back, you can see what a good choice that would have been. You would never do it on your own because it's too scary, but if you're following the formula and believe in it, as I do, you would do it. If you were committed to rebalancing, you would have done much better in the market than just straight buy and hold. Now, index funds come in all varieties, including the exchange-traded funds that you buy through stock brokerage accounts. And so your allocation should basically include funds for large U.S. companies, small U.S. companies, and also you should own emerging market stocks. I don't think the European stocks are so important because basically we're all mature economies and we're doing more or less the same thing. Their indexes rise and fall at different times, which is helpful, but I think the main diversification now is coming from emerging markets, companies in China and India, Brazil, Russia, Southeast Asia. All of these countries skipped the recession that laid the U.S. and Europe low. Their growth slowed, but then their growth picked right up again. China, at this point, is the economic engine pulling the world's economies along. Now, another lesson. This is a mistaken lesson that some investors have drawn from this recent debacle. They have given up on stocks. All their retirement plan money is going into bonds. They sold it. They sold their stocks and they said, never, ever, ever again. But ironically, bonds are actually riskier than stocks right now. Assuming that this recovery continues, as I do, the interest rates are going to go up and the value of the bond funds are going to go down. So this is, so you're not as safe in these as you think. However, it is essential to own these bond funds nevertheless as your safety net, because I may be wrong that the economy is going to, something terrible might happen, and that is what your bonds are for, and you also need them for rebalancing. If the economy collapses, your bonds will do great, and you can still withdraw some money if you need it. The bond portion of your money should be invested safely. Governments, high-quality corporates, municipals, if you're investing with after-tax money, some inflation protection, U.S. Treasury securities as a hedge against rising prices. Now, new for me are foreign bond funds that buy the equivalent of treasuries for the sovereign debt of countries abroad. They're a hedge against further dollar declines, which I think is a pretty good bet. If interest rates, when interest rates rise, there could be a dollar rally, but I still think the dollar is in long-term decline. For extras, I like gold. Not to chase the price. Chasing the price, again, is like trying to time the market. It's a fool's game. If you buy gold, you would buy it only as a hedge against some total currency disaster in the United States, and you would buy it and you wouldn't ever touch it. It would be a permanent reserve. You'd pay no attention to it. You wouldn't use it for anything. It is purely something to hold for safety, not for anything up and down. And I like commodities as an inflation hedge and as a play on the growth of the developing countries. I buy both of them with exchange-traded funds. I don't like the hedge fund world or any of its different strategies. They charge too much, and, this will surprise you, on average, putting all the hedge funds together, they don't outperform the S&P 500. Some of them are great, and those are the ones you read about in the papers. Others are terrible, and those are the ones you probably bought. Hedge funds charge much too much. And that's another reason that they don't outperform the S&P. They were blown apart in the market meltdown that they were supposed to protect you against. They are already back in their glory because they are, of course, status investments. You like to say, well, my hedge fund, that's a very big deal thing to say, and you pay a lot for that. They have been cut down this time to $1,000 minimum investments so that the ordinary investor can have the privilege of saying, I own a hedge fund, and lose as much money as the richer investors did. You get bragging rights, but you don't get performance. One more lesson, which brings me back to your concerns as people involved with social insurance. We have been worshiping for many years now the market economy. Everything should have a market-based solution. But the successful model that we have had in this country is not pure capitalism. It is regulated capitalism. The government has a major role to play in this. After the Depression and the Pecora Commission, a lot of wonderful regulations were put in. We got the SEC, we got the Mutual Fund Act, all of those things. And what followed was the longest period in our history without a financial panic, which I credit very much to having good regulations, iron walls that held things up. But of course, people forget, and so over time we deregulated and we deregulated and we deregulated, and then we finally come to the panic of 2008, which was partly, many reasons involved in it, but partly a result of lack of regulation in these markets. The panic of 2008 was very much like the panics of 1873 and 1893 and 1931, all of which took place also in deregulated markets. If we had not put all of that money into saving the banks and into the stimulus, which everybody's screaming about with the deficits, in my opinion, we would now be in 1933. So if we don't learn our lessons now about this, we will face another collapse, which is another reason to keep bonds in your portfolio. Now, I've been talking about very simple investment strategies here. The surprising truth is that the simple strategies are also the very best ones available. Now, Wall Street wants you to think that index funds and asset allocation is just too simple. It's for newbies. They're training wheels. Then you can grow up and be a real investor and buy hedge funds, and buy tax-deferred annuities, and buy all these expensive things they want to sell you. They're for the big boys. They carry the whiff of money. In truth, those things will make your broker rich. They will not make you rich. The simple products are, in fact, the most sophisticated ones. They are bought by people who know that fees matter and who insist on value for money, and they believe the research that shows what really works. And if you're wondering, I use these simple strategies myself, and in fact, they are all I use. Well, I look forward to talking further about any of these things in the question and answer period that follows these remarks. You will notice that I gave no space in this talk to opposing points of view. Opposing points of view are wrong. I was reading some angry letters once from readers who disagreed vigorously with something I'd said in Newsweek, and a friend stuck her head in my office and said, "Never mind, Jane. Remember the saying, many enemies, much honor." And I said, "That's terrific. Who said that?" And she said, "Mussolini." So I know I have been up here dictating about personal finance, but I have been reporting on markets and personal finance for many, 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 many years. And I have been investing for many, many, many years. I have seen fads come and go. I've seen tax shelters melt down. I've watched expensive investments get buried under their fees, and I've watched index funds succeed. I follow just 4 principles. You can't see the future. If you save and diversify your investments, that doesn't matter. Only a few things work, and they work really well. And in the end, what matters most is using your money to get more out of life. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. Thank you. Thank you. I will now be happy to take any objections and complaints. And there are microphones here. Yes.
Very fascinating, very good speech, Jane. Professor Tzvi Bodhi at Boston University School of Business takes a slightly different tack on retirement funds, namely recommending tips for the baseline to provide a guarantee, saying that can't afford the risk even of the diversified portfolio. What are your thoughts of his perspective?
I've spoken to Tzvi about that more than once, and clearly I disagree with him. I think that as long as you have a long enough horizon, you are reinvesting dividends. I still think that and you have substantial bonds too, again, age-appropriate situation. I simply disagree with him, and he and I have compared charts and pro formas and all that stuff, and I disagree with him. But he's a very smart man, however, and I call him up all the time, and he may turn out to be right. But if he's right, my portfolio, my retirement is in trouble. Yes.
I like target date funds because I don't want to spend any time thinking about my money. But we learned the hard way that they're not all equal with our college saving fund through the state of Maryland. that it was very exposed to equities, I thought, amazingly so, when we needed the money 1 year away. And so do you have any rules of thumb about target date funds for more short-term needs like college as opposed to living out a 30-year retirement? And also, do you have any comment about, I don't know if this is a conflict of interest, but states competing against each other to show high returns, and therefore their target date funds look like a good idea, but they're a little bit too aggressive? I saw a little bit of reporting about that at one point, where one state, I think, still had people almost 100% in equities when they were just a year or two out, and just sort of comment
That's
about that.
completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
I meant to look up the Maryland and Virginia and D.C. funds before I came, and I forgot. The age-related funds are what you're talking about
yeah.
in the college 529s. There are supposed to be more stocks when the kid is young, and then bonds and money funds at the end. Does Maryland have three, conservative, middling, and an aggressive target?
No, they have,
age-related
I think they
funds?
just have age-related funds, and then they have maybe all bonds and all equities. And
Well,
you can
they are
choose-
being
you can choose.
completely irresponsible. When you are looking at a target, an age-related fund, the key thing, absolutely key thing, is that by the time your child gets to be 18, it should be largely, almost entirely, in bonds or short-term bonds and money markets.
I think it was half in stocks.
And that
1 year
was
out. Yeah.
that was terrible. I mean, I would go crazy if that had happened. It was absolutely wrong, and if that's the only fund that you have in a 529, you shouldn't choose it. You should choose something else and try to manage it yourself and have more stocks when the child is young, and then move into bonds and into money markets. It's become popular for a lot of the states to have these three age-related funds. You can be aggressive, you can be in the middle, you can be conservative, and always, I'm sure you know from research, you give people those three choices, they all choose the middle, except for a few. But most of them will choose the middle, and those are still more aggressive when the child reaches 18. So the key when you look at them is what the diversification is at 18. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the merits of converting part of your portfolio at retirement or later into an annuity to protect against the risk of living a very, very long time and running out of money.
I very much like immediate annuities, so converting part of your money into an immediate annuity to have an income for life if you don't have another pension, I think is a great idea. I think it's probably, you don't want to do that when you're 55 or 60, but as you're 65 or later, I would say to take part of your portfolio and use it for that is a very good idea. But this is an immediate annuity where you take a chunk of money and it's how much you get per month. And by the way, it's very easy to find the best ones. There's a place called immediateannuities.com, and that will just tell you for $50,000 this is what you get, and it lines up all of the insurance companies. Couldn't be easier. The bad thing to buy are these expensive tax-deferred annuities where you sort of build up some money and then they will give you a fixed amount of income for life, and they say it'll go up in the future. It will never go up in the future because of the cost structure. And there what you're doing is effectively buying a lifetime fixed annuity for a high price when you can buy it for a low price by buying a plain vanilla annuity. I have a lot in my book about these tax-deferred annuities because they're selling like hotcakes to well-to-do older people, and that's something else drives me crazy. Yes.
Jane, hi. I just wanted to share with you two little things that you might add to your arsenal on the points you were making tonight. First of all, a couple years ago, Zvi Bodhi at Boston University had a little conference that was fascinating about investments, and they had 3 Nobel laureates, including Paul Samuelson. But Robert Solow made the most interesting response to the question that was posed to all 3 of them: how would you be investing your money at this time? This is after the big meltdown. And Robert Solow, who, by the way, was a Nobel laureate in economics for growth theory, said, 30 years ago, I decided that it was irrelevant. I pay no attention to the markets. I just invest in index funds. I don't pay any attention to it from day to day or at all. And he appealed to his wife to explain, and he paid no attention. The other little story was back at the 94 to 6 Advisory Council. Some people here might have been there for this. A guy named Tom Jones was CEO of TIAA-CREF at the time. And he and his people presented some material where they'd done an analysis of actively managed funds versus index funds. And he showed roughly a 200 basis point difference over long periods of time advantage to
Index funds.
and he said, why would you invest in anything else? So I just wanted to know that
Thank you.
you have lots of company in your thinking.
Nobel laureate Bill Sharp puts all of his money into index funds, and the name has just escaped me. The big financial behavior guy. Oh. Yeah, exactly, Dick Thaler. He's it all in index funds, because I always ask these people when I interview them, and it almost always comes out, I'm in index funds, I'm too busy, I do asset allocation, next thing, right? Yes.
I think Janice can first.
Oh, okay, Janice?
Okay. You mentioned in your list of things ETFs, and I've looked at them enough to figure out that they're not all the same. So can you talk a little bit more about why I would look at an ETF and what kind of ETF I might look at and what I would look for when I look at it?
Exchange-traded funds are mutual funds, but you buy them through your brokerage account, and instead of buying like an open-ended fund where you buy directly from the fund itself. And there are some that cover the market as a whole, and then there are hundreds of ETFs that cover little sections of the market, real estate in China, brothels in Guatemala, whatever. Lots and lots of little things, none of which you want. It is a very efficient way to buy gold rather than buying a gold mutual fund, because gold mutual funds are gold mining stocks. So if you want gold, you really need to use an ETF. They're an efficient way to buy commodities because the commodity mutual funds are very expensive to manage. So it's very cheap to buy one of these well-diversified commodities index with an ETF. Otherwise, in my view, there is only one reason to have them. If you are working with a stockbroker and he or she wants to sell you a mutual fund, a loaded mutual fund, that is very expensive. But with that same stockbroker, you can say, give me that same index in an ETF. That is much cheaper. So basically, ETFs are a way for stockbrokers to compete with the no-load index funds, because they can provide, if their customers know about them, they can provide that product. So if you want, however, to buy an S&P fund, even though ETFs are cheap, it's still cheaper at Vanguard. Okay, have I answered it? Yeah. Yes.
Jane, a follow-up to the annuities question. What would you think about the government requiring retirees to annuitize a part of their retirement account balances? I mean, I'm sure the Tea Party would have something else to say, but what would you say?
I would say, in theory, I would really like that. But in practice, it would be extraordinarily difficult to put in, because obviously some people don't need something annuitized for life. Again, you have a government pension, there's your annuity, So why should you be required to annuitize your Social Security too? And so it's very hard for me to think about how I would draw the lines saying who should annuitize and who shouldn't annuitize. So I would I can the whole idea of private accounts anyway, and just take Social Security, that's your annuity. Yes.
Two questions on the use of resources heading into retirement. First one, considering real estate is still shaky, does it make sense to pay off your mortgage before retiring, or should you take it with you into retirement? And the second question is, does it make sense to, let's say when you reach the age for full benefit of Social Security, does it make sense to take it then, or should you draw down your 401k and wait till age 70 to maximize Social Security benefits?
On the second question, I think drawing down your 401k is probably useful, and you might as well maximize at 70. So I think that's a good strategy, but people have different feelings and different choices, but that is a good strategy. The first one on paying down your mortgage, I do think it's a very good idea to have a paid-up home by the time you retire. I will put a little asterisk on that, however, and that assumes that you have enough money to pay your bills and go forward, so that you are not depriving yourself of liquidity or cash because you put it into your house instead of putting it into your bank account. So if you have planned well, and you've got a pension, you have enough resources so that you know you could create an income stream for yourself in retirement, and without even doing the house, then I say prepay, because if you don't have the mortgage to pay, then your monthly expenses are that much lower. But so you have to, I can read it either way, but it's important to have enough resources, enough liquidity.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you buy the annuity, or if you have a defined benefit pension plan so that you have guaranteed income beyond Social Security, how do you think that should affect the asset mix in the remainder of your portfolio? Should you have a higher percentage of stocks than you would otherwise, or should you still be mostly in bonds?
You can have a higher, if you have a guaranteed income from, a pension, or if you've got the annuity, then in theory you could have more in stocks. However, you still have to consider how liquid you are if there was a crash. In other words, if your annuity and your Social Security and your pension are paying everything that you need, that is when you could be more aggressive if you wanted to be. If you are also needing to draw from your outside investments, then I don't think you should be so aggressive, because if the market is down, you don't want to be forced to sell stocks when they're down. So that would be the reason to hold bonds at that time, even though you have an annuity. You always think about your liquidity and about protecting yourself from a bad stock market. Yes?
Although the performance of the market of about the past year has changed things a bit, in the early going after the meltdown, there was talk about 401ks being a huge failed experiment, and there would have to be changes in public policy, including tax policy. Do you have any suggestions for changes in broad public policy, including tax policy, given the recent experience and also the pronounced resistance of investor behavior to the wisdom that you've dispensed again this evening?
I do think 401ks are a semi-failure, because people don't understand them and they're left to manage their money. They don't have a clue, and they change jobs and they spend it. I mean, it is a terrible situation. So whereas I would not force annuitizing on Social Security, I like Dick Thaler's stuff. I think everyone should be signed up automatically for their 401k. I think they should be increased automatically. I think it should be a required rollover to an IRA when they leave the job. I think that they should not be able to borrow against their 401k. So I would support those kinds of changes, which most people would think are much too draconian, but they thought it was draconian when you said an automatic sign-up. I think that I like the IRA proposals that are in the government that have been running around for a few years to require small businesses that don't offer pensions to offer access to an IRA. I've forgotten what Gene Sterling had a name for them. Automatic IRAs. Thank you. This is the right crowd. So I strongly support that as a way to get some additional money for people who don't have the 401ks. I do think it's a continuing problem because people don't know how to run the money. I would even consider making prudent target retirement funds mandatory. Yes?
Well, for a 65-year-old married couple retired, what are your thoughts on a sustainable rate of withdrawal from retirement assets invested according to your 110 rule?
Right. Sustainable rate of withdrawal is...
Real withdrawal.
Yes, and you can, and by the way, it uses this kind of mix, uses the rule of 110 basically to create the mix. It's classically 4%. There are studies where they're trying to get 4.5, or they're trying to get 5 in an attempt to give you more money. But I am still, personally, I'm sticking with the classical 4%. 4% the year you retire, and then an annual increase for inflation. So that remains my preferred number. But by the way, this is going to be, talking about social safety nets, this is the next huge area for products, whether they're good or whether they're deceptive, and there would be plenty of the second sort. Banks, insurance companies, mutual funds, everyone is trying to capture what they call the decumulation market, because, they all were in the accumulation market, but this whole generation is moving to the situation that this gentleman is in, where you're going to start drawing down. And that's where they're now going to try to be, and it's just going to be a huge mess, because a lot of them will be deceptive and people will get in trouble. So you got to watch that. You are the people to do it. Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
You originally said that some of us might disagree with you on some points.
Ah,
I will challenge the last and be more conservative, because someone in an upper income asset situation is likely to be paying taxes as well on the investment earnings, and those taxes will come out of the investment earnings, not out of the spendable money. I would say use your rule of 100 or 110, take age subtracted from your magic number, and divide your assets by that number, and that's what you can spend. And so I'm a little bit more conservative on the basis that the rest of your investment return will go solely to cover inflation and to cover the taxes. Everything else, just spend it down by the number of years. And I would take the age that you subtract as being the younger of the two spouses.
Okay, here you have, as I said, there's a lot of work being done on what should be the proper drawdown, and here you have another opinion. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, good night, everyone. We'll have some coffee and talk, but good night. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Academy members at 8 a.m. in the First Amendment Lounge, or I guess we're right next door, for breakfast. No, we're right here. Sorry, I'm back on. We'll be right back in here at 8 o'clock. The Commissioner of Social Security, Michael Astor, will be speaking. But before that, we'll have a few updates about the National Academy of Social Insurance. See you tomorrow. If you're coming just for the roundtables, 9 o'clock across the 5 rooms, and 10 o'clock back in here. Thank you.